Week number 5, Fireside Chats continue with SS Grandma, and our first question comes from Chloe.
Great Grandma, what was it like when you were a kid?
Let's see. Well, I had a lot of fun. I can remember as a kid, I was always playing tag or something like that. And the only board game we had was checkers and cards. So we learned to play bridge, 500, and I forget the other game. On rainy days, we had to go inside while we'd sit there and play cards, which is good for learning your numbers. And I can remember walking to the drugstore with my grandpa holding his hand, and we'd go get a whole quart of ice cream, and then go home, and the whole family would have that 1 quart of ice cream, about 6 or 8 of us. But that was a big deal until they got the ice cream makers where you turn them, but we never had one of those. And other than that, I was a tomboy. I climbed trees even till I was 16 or more. I always liked climbing trees. I loved climbing trees and being in them, jumping out of them, running, playing tag, hide and go seek. I was an outside girl. I liked to swim. We didn't really swim much in the rivers in Portland or the ocean. It might have been a private pool or county pool if we ever got in, which was rare. But we came down to California when I was 9 because of the Depression. My dad lost his job, and his brother was working for the railroad down here in California. He said, "Come down here, Mort." So he piled us all in the Model A, all 3 kids and my mom. And down we came. We lived with them until my mother was finally able to get a job as a waitress in Pig and Whistle, which was a very fancy restaurant. And I don't really know. My dad had different jobs, grocery stores, different things. And we lived with my aunt and uncle till we could get a rental and started school. And the first school was St. John's in the Hyde Park down near Inglewood. And I was more or less the little housekeeper at home at 9, because my sister was sort of a dreamer and she just didn't do too much. So I was sort of more or less in charge of the house. And that's how I learned to cook, ? I could open a can or do something. Because my mother would leave the house at 11 to go to work, would have to come home but couldn't come, it was too far, at 3 and then back at 5 for the dinner hour at the restaurant. And so I'd see her in the morning when she would brush my long curls for school, get me ready for school. Then I wouldn't see her because I'd be asleep when she got home at night until the weekend, really, because she'd get lots of times Sunday off. And so my childhood was happy. We never felt we were put upon because we weren't rich or anything. We were happy with whatever we got. We'd go around selling milk bottles for 2 cents so we could get 10 cents to go to movie on Saturday. And if we got more, we would buy a bag of candy. And I learned to do any kind of work. I sold, I think it was Liberty magazine for a nickel, door to door. But I don't know how many I sold, not too many. But I had a fairly happy childhood, I thought. I never didn't complain. I was always playing with the neighbor kids or something, making mud pies or something, using my imagination. If we had cardboard boxes, we'd put them up and pretend it was a store. We were real good at pretending. And that's about it for my childhood. I learned to work, and I'm grateful for that. I felt if I went to ask for a job, they'd say, "Can you do this?" And I'd say, "I can learn anything in half an hour." And I guess they believed me because they would hire me. I maybe sound lost.
You managed to have a good time even though it was the Depression.
That's right. Had a good time.
So eventually you did grow up and you moved to a place called Rolling Hills, and Aunt Louie gave us a tip and said that there was a billy goat that caused some trouble and said that would be a good story to tell.
Well, your dad was Grandpa was always taking someone. Someone gave him this billy goat. I don't know how or when. And so we tied it up to the big tree in the front of the house because we didn't have a fence off or anything. And so all of a sudden the kids were watching a Saturday program on TV. They didn't get to watch much TV. We were the last in the neighborhood to get one, but when we did, they were allowed to watch something on Saturday afternoon. And pretty soon, bump, 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 they'd look there with that billy goat would be bumping his head against the big glass door. And Bruce would have to go catch it, bring it back, tie it up to that tree around the front of the house, and back in they'd come. And pretty soon, bump, 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 there's the billy goat again. And back out he'd go and do it. Well, it got pretty tiresome after a while. I don't know, that billy goat's going to break that window one of these days. So Stan gave it to somebody in Torrance. I don't know who it was. Bruce was happy when he got rid of the billy goat.
Darn billy goat. Our next question is about your mom. Had a twin sister. Tell us the tale of the twins.
Well, this is the twins on their first communion dresses. Aren't those ornate? They did things in those days, of course, was most of it by hand, or it would be a foot pedal sewing machine. So that was Magdalene and Teresa. And they were the first children of Jacob and Elizabeth Everly. And I think they had a fairly happy childhood, but Grandpa had a shoe repair business, and they lived in the back of the store for many years till they could afford to buy a house in Portland, Oregon. And then they bought a big white house on Hague Avenue, I think. And I can remember going there and going up the stairs to the attic and then sliding down the steps with her. Oh, boy, my grandmother, being German, kept them polished and shiny. We'd bump down those stairs and then run up again and bump down again. It was fun. But Teresa had great artistic talent, and she turned out to be a wonderful artist, and we have a lot of artists in the family now. She got so good that she was chosen to paint more or less what they call, like the Rose Queen in Pasadena. They have a Rose Festival in Portland, Oregon, and she would paint the Rose Queen every year. And my mother was a good singer and sang, and I always joined the choir, or was in the choir, ended up directing the choir for 25 years at St. Margaret Mary down by Rolling Hills, and I sang for funerals and weddings. So there's music in the family, too, from those twins. My mother died fairly young of cancer, ovarian cancer and breast cancer. And Teresa was sort of a wild one in a way because she was hurt falling off a merry-go-round. I don't know if it was a push type or one that you paid on. And I don't know what kind of a doctor they took her to. But all I know is to try and straighten her leg or injury, somebody jumped on it. Well, she was completely crippled the rest of her life and always limped. But if you'd say anything about, oh, you can't do it, she'd say, what do you think I am, a cripple? And she wasn't. Madge and Teresa ended up marrying the Bell brothers, Earl and Mortimer. My dad was Mortimer Bell, and Teresa married Earl Bell. The brothers, Ray, Earl, Leon, and Mortimer came out from Wisconsin, when their parents died. And I'm not sure of the town. And they met the twins, and pretty soon they were married to the twins. And the marriages both lasted quite a while. Forever, really. And I once asked, how come we have Bell when we both have German ancestors from Germany? Where did the bell come from? Well, I finally found out there was an Englishman named Bell who lived in Germany. So one of the grandmothers married this Englishman. That's all I can tell you about it, and that's why we have a bell. Well, I was Connie Bell until I became a Smith.
The tale of your great-great-grandma and great-great-aunt. Well, this has been week number 5 Fireside Chats, and we'll be back next week for week number 6 by the fire with Grandma.